Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to welcome you on the board of our aircraft. We will travel
Hey guys, we are going to do a early evening flight down to Atlantic City. I was talking to one of my buddies here in Central Jersey, and he mentioned that he had never been to Atlantic City, although he's been a pilot for almost 20 years, I think. So maybe Class Charlie is a little intimidating to some people, or maybe you just don't have experience going into a towered airfield. So I wanted to do a flight to Atlantic City. I'm going to cut out all of the boring parts. I'm just going to keep in the radio calls and, of course, the landing and the taxi back and the takeoff. So you guys that live in New Jersey can see what it's like to fly into a Charlie. I don't think it's very intimidating, but I've done it, 20, 30 times already. So maybe I'm just accustomed to it. But for you guys that haven't done it before, this might be interesting to use. And if you're not from New Jersey, the same procedures would most likely apply to your local Charlie if you have one in your area. And to some extent, even your Class Delta, minus a couple extra little tidbits. But we're going to let this aircraft land, and then we're going to hit the runway and take off. Over traffic RV departing runway 6, headed out to the southeast overbridge. Give it some full power. Slight crosswind from the right, although it's minimal winds right now. Holding back on the stick just so you can feel the pressure, and away we go. Looking for 75. Not too bumpy today. Woohoo! Well, I take that back. Maybe it is a little bumpy, as we just had a wing dip just at tree level there. We do have a TFR up ahead, not active right now, but active soon. Active on the 23rd to the 25th for the UN.
Takeoff altitude.
We're going to climb straight out. And once we get enough altitude over the pattern altitude, we'll give it a right turn and head down to the south towards Atlantic City. And as we're in this right turn, headed basically to be on course, 1500 climbing to 2500, we're going to give McGuire approach a call, and we'll get flight following on the way down. Switch over to McGuire approach, 126475. Listen for a second. And let's give him a call. McGuire approach, November 713.
November 713, McGuire approach to McGuire altimeter 29901, ident, save request.
Ident, November 713 is about 1.5 miles to the east of Oldbridge. Request flight following to Atlantic City. Type is RV-12, and we're 2000 climbing 2500.
Number 713, roger, radar contact, a mile and a half southeast of Old Bridge, squawk 3014.
3014, November 713. And just like that, we have flight following. And around here, so basically I'm going to follow the path directly to a waypoint called Knnis, K-N-N-I-S, which is just south of Lakehurst. I might go above the Lakehurst Delta. They are active Monday through Friday. Weekends are closed. So if the controller doesn't clear us through, we'll just go over. It stops at 2700, so it's just a couple hundred feet above us. So going for Oldbridge to Knnis.
713, traffic 11 to 12 o'clock and 3 miles westbound indicating 2,500.
Okay, we'll be looking at 713. I have him on the scope, but we need him with our eyeballs before we can say that we have him. So I use that waypoint to avoid the restricted area of McGuire, which is where they do have a shooting range or something. And then from there, it's directly to Coyle, which is a VOR, and around that point, they'll switch us over to Atlantic City approach. So for now, I will say see ya, and we'll come back again in a minute or two. We've climbed to 2,700 feet, which is 100 feet above the Lakehurst class Delta. The controller did not say that we could go through the Delta. Sometimes they coordinate that on the back end with the tower controller, sometimes not. Controller was a little bit busy, so I just opted to go above it. In the meantime, we can tune into the Atlantic City ATIS pretty far out. We're still about 50 miles out, and we have a good signal. So we'll take a listen. We'll get the runway. We'll plug it into the navigator so we know which runway to expect. And by plugging it in, it also reminds us when we get a little bit closer which runway we're going to be expecting.
Atlantic City ATIS information, November 2154, early weather observation, wind 090 at 8, visibility 10 miles. Sky conditions clear below 12,000, temperature 23, dew point 16, altimeter 29993. Incoming aircraft expect visual approach, runway 13. Notice all air emissions through the VIP TFR in effect off of the DuPont 331 radial at 4.3 DME fixed, 28 nautical mile radius, surface level 180. Atlantic City Vortex out of service. Runway 31 rails and pathies are out of service. After this weather information, available flight service frequencies, advise to contact you at November.
November. Okay, we're expecting visual 13, so I've loaded that in. By loading that into the GTN, that has drawn a line for final for runway 13. As we get closer to Atlantic City, we're going to expect that, and we can see where final is, and it's a little bit easier to, in your head, to see or visualize where your base is and where your downwind is and so forth. It's easy to get mixed up with some of these runways because 13...
713, restricted area 5001 is active surface to 4,000, remain outside.
Remain outside, November 713. That is us, here's the restricted area right here. We're going to pass it off to the east. That's typically active 24/7. Some days on holidays, that restricted area is cold, but not very frequently. Usually it's surface to 4,000, but there is a section of this which goes up to 8,000.
7 Alpha Alpha, transition approved through the Lakehurst class Delta.
We have reached the coil waypoint, so Mr. Autopilot is turning right to a course of 210, which is direct to the center of the airport, Atlantic City Airport. We will go through this restricted area, 5002 Charlie, which is surface to 3,000. We're not going to do that. I don't know if it's active or not, but we're not going to even want to find out. So we're going to hit track mode and move over to the right just a little bit more.
Number 7 Alpha Alpha, turn right heading 240.
Right heading 240, 7 Alpha Alpha.
So from this direction, we're going to expect them to tell us to enter in on a left base for 3-1. And usually when they tell me to do that, I'm going to aim directly for the 3-mile final point. So I'm going to hit direct to, flight plan, visual 3-mile final, activate, and then we'll go into nav mode. And this will take us to a point that's going to be a 3-mile final. So essentially we're entering on base, and we're going to be far enough away from the airport at that time when we get closer to the airport. Depending on the traffic, we might cut that corner. Depends what kind of clearance that they give us.
Approach 124.6.
124.6, November 713. Flip over to McGuire approach 124.6. Now I already plugged that in because I've heard other aircraft being transferred over to that frequency. So I know that's what to expect. And I also know that because that's the typical frequency that we use when we approach this airport from the north. Otherwise, you can click on the airport, go to waypoint frequencies, and find out the departure or the approach frequencies, and have one of them pre-programmed in.
McGuire approach 126.47. We'll see you.
12647. Have a good night. Exit jet 799.
McGuire approach November 713, level 2,700, inbound with November.
November 713, Atlantic City approach, Atlantic City altimeter 29994, enter left base, runway 13.
94, enter left base 13, runway 13, November 713. 29994. All right. So that will be the last radio call from them for a while until we get a lot closer. Also too, because I have the visual 13 approach programmed in, it adds that visual 3 nautical mile final waypoint to the flight plan. It also sets the altitude that you should be at that point. So it's indicating about 1,100 feet that I want to be at. So what I'll do is I will activate VNAV mode, and I will turn the altitude select down to 1,100 feet. So when we get close enough, it will determine when that point is, when we should start our descent down to reach 1,100 feet at that 3 nautical mile waypoint. But it'll only descend if your altitude bug is set at or below that altitude which is in your flight plan. If you're in approach mode, which we'll do later, that doesn't apply. But this is just kind of a safety thing so that you don't accidentally descend below what maybe a controller told you to. Maybe the controller says descend to 2,000, but your flight plan says 1,100. So you would set your altitude to 2,000, and it would only go down to 2,000.
267, Atlantic City departure, radar contact.
Also, you can see on my right-hand screen, I've put up the zoomed-in map of Atlantic City where you can see the taxiways and the taxiway designators. The first taxiway that we're going to come to is going to be Charlie, then our cross runway, and then the next one, I believe this is Alpha. So we'll have that up so we can follow along if we need to, but I suspect that we're going to turn off at Charlie. Over here, I've also plugged in the tower frequency because I know that that's going to probably be the next frequency that's going to be coming my way.
November 8 Lima.
So we're about 1 minute from our top of descent. The system has told me vertical track, basically to give me a 1 minute warning. I see the pink arrows coming in here, and so we're going to expect a 500 foot per minute descent once we start to pitch down. Of course, I'm going to power back a little bit, otherwise we're going to exceed some speed limits here. All right, VNAV is flashing, meaning that the state is changing from armed to active, and we've pitched down. I'm going to power back. About 4,500 RPM. Should keep us around 108 knots. Unless otherwise told, it's up to you to start your descent. He doesn't know how fast your aircraft is normally going to descend. He's expecting about 500 foot per minute. But if you don't start your descent on your own, you're going to be on final at 2,500 feet. Unless otherwise told.
713, contact tower 120.3.
120.3, November 713. Atlantic City Tower, November 713, left base for 313.
Number 713 Tower, runway 13, clear to land.
Runway 13, cleared land, November 713. All right, we're number 1 in line, so we're going to cut this corner a little bit over to track mode, and we'll bring that in a little bit. We're going to turn on our landing light.
8 Yankee Tango, your final experimental about 2 o'clock and 3 miles. Could be joining about a 3 or 4 mile final.
It is a little bit more active here than your typical non-controlled airport, so I'm going to keep my speed up until I get a little bit closer to the runway. There's no need to dump the flaps when you're 3 miles out, at least not in my aircraft.
8 Yankee Tango should be right off here right now, 1,300.
Still looking for traffic, 578 Yankee Tango.
November 713 has that traffic in sight.
Roger.
All right, we're going to cut the power and line up on final. We are a little high.
Inside, 578 Yankee Tango.
Yankee Tango, follow traffic number 2, runway 13, clear to land.
Runway 13, clear to land, following the traffic. Sky of 728 Yankee Tango.
Wind is coming from the left, just a little bit. 090 at 20 knots on glide slope. Flaps are still up.
500.
Below glide slope, all right. We're gonna pull some power out, pitch up, come into the flaps extension speed, flaps come down. And we're pitching for 70. The book says 55 in this plane, but 70 gives you
300.
a little bit more aileron control, in my opinion. You do float just a little bit more
200.
down the runway, but it's manageable. And even on short runways, unless it's a grass field or something, 70, I use 70 for pretty much everything.
3625 Sarah Lanxey round.
As I get over the numbers, I'm looking for maybe 65.
Roger, do you want to fly following to your destination?
100.
Hi, 25 Sierra, runway 13, taxi via November, Papa, Bravo, cross runway 22.
You might be able to see those center line
50.
lights.
40. 30. 20. 10. 5, 3, 2,
November,
1.
Papa, Bravo, cross runway 22.
All right, we're under control. We're going to turn off on Charlie. Never back taxi on the runway unless asked to. And always try and take the first exit unless otherwise instructed.
713, say intentions.
713 will request a taxi back and a departure to the north at 2,500.
713, roger, runway 13, taxi via Bravo.
13 via Bravo, 713. All right, now, because this is a Charlie, he's going to come back with a clearance for me.
713, what's your destination?
It's going to be 3 November 6 for 713.
Roger.
I'm holding.
November 713, new squawk code will be 3646.
3646, November 713. That radio call from him isn't standard. That's the first time I've heard that from them. Usually they'll give you a full fly runway heading, maintain at or below 1600, departure frequency 12645, and squawk 3646.
Yankee Tango, taxi back with me via Bravo.
Taxi via Bravo, runway 13, sky of 78.
So because that's a normal clearance that he always gives me, I'm going to set my bug to 1600 feet, and the heading is going to be runway heading, which is 130, heading mode 130. Where are we? There we go. And that's what we'll expect to execute when he tells us to go. So flight plan is cleared out. I'm going to put in direct for now, direct to 3 November 6. And we'll hit direct, flight plan, Old Bridge, activate. Tower November 713 on Bravo, short of 13, ready for departure.
Number 713, runway 13, clear for takeoff.
Runway 13, clear for takeoff, 713. Trim is set, flaps are up. Line up, engine instruments are in the green, full power, brakes are off. A little bit of a crosswind from the left, stomping on that right rudder. Nose up just a little bit so I can feel the pressure on the stick. And away we go, looking for 75. Maintaining 130 on the heading.
Number 713, you can climb on course.
I'm on course 713.
Takeoff
Direct.
altitude.
Full bridge activate. And it's going to be a left turn out.
73 Yankee Tango, runway 13, clear for takeoff. Fly runway heading for now.
And probably in 1 minute or so, he's going to have a switch over to departure, which I've already plugged in.
Number 713, you can climb to requested altitude, contact departure. Good night.
Climb as requested over to departure 713. We did request 2,500, so I'll reset my bug. Departure November 713, 1400, climbing 2500.
November 713, Atlantic City, departure, radar contact, thank you.
And nav mode, autopilot on. And we'll climb in indicated airspeed mode at 75 knots. So that's how easy it is to get into and out of Atlantic City, which is a Class Charlie. Like I said, typically it's a little bit more involved in the sense that, like tonight, there wasn't much activity going on. There was me and one other guy in the pattern. But if there's more activity going on, sometimes after you land and you taxi off of the runway, off of the first exit that you come to, they'll have you switch over to ground. So have that frequency ready. Typically when they do get busier, it's the ground controller that will ask you, what are your intentions? Do you want to taxi to signature, the FBO, or do you want to taxi back and depart again? If you want to depart again, as you saw, I was talking to tower, but if you're talking to ground, it's going to be the exact same thing. November 713 request taxi back and a departure to the north to 3 November 6. Requested altitude will be 3,000. Type is RV-12. And they'll fill out sort of like a flight plan for you, and they'll come back with that clearance. A full clearance, at least at Atlantic City, is typically going to say, November 713, on departure, maintain runway heading, climb at or below 1600.
McGuire approach.
Departure frequency 124.6, squawk 3646.
8098
So,
Romeo McGuire approach. McGuire altimeter is 299.
have your little notepad, jot down that information.
29901, good evening.
It's nice to have abbreviation, so if they say at or below, I just use an at sign. And for me, I know that that's what that means. But once they read that clearance to you, you read it back to them verbatim, as verbatim as you can. And if you mess up, it's no problem. He'll repeat what you missed. And before you line up for your departure, set your heading bug, set your altitude bug, and keep those numbers in mind as you depart so you don't exceed the clearance that they gave you. If you've had a fun day at the beach and let's say you've taken an Uber back to Signature, the FBO, the ground controller isn't going to be the first guy that you talk to. It's probably going to be the clearance controller. Now, in real life, it might be the same guy, but clearance at larger airports has a different frequency. So you're going to tune in the clearance frequency, which I don't have with me right now. But you're going to tune it in, and you'll say Atlantic City clearance November 713, and you give them a second. Typically, those clearance people are busy on their computers, so don't start yapping away. Let him get back to you. He'll come back to you, and then you tell him what you want. Clearance November 713 request VFR departure to 3 November 6. Request 3,000 feet. Type is RV-12. And again, it'll take him a minute or two to get back to you, and he'll give you that clearance. November 713, on departure, maintain runway heading. Climb at or below 1600. Departure frequency 124.6, squawk 3646. And you read that back to him. And then after that, you're done with him. You can switch over to ground and request clearance to start taxiing like you would any Class Delta. But going to a Charlie is a lot of fun. It's something new that maybe you haven't done before. Atlantic City isn't that busy. They're very helpful here. I've never heard them yell at anyone, even if the pilot was being a little difficult. And the real benefit to flying into a Charlie, I mean, down here, you get real close to Atlantic City if you want to go to the casinos. But the real benefit is that the procedures at a Bravo, like Newark or LaGuardia, is pretty much the same. You're going to have a clearance. There's going to be a clearance controller or clearance frequency involved, sometimes. So flying into a Charlie is good practice for when you get into the big leagues and you have more controllers to deal with.
Wire approach, Tarka 78 with you, descending 10,500 for 4,000 at Gambie.
Tarka 78 McGuire approach, altimeter is 2991.
91.
The only additional thing at some of the larger airports like Newark is sometimes they'll also have a ramp controller. So at Tower Field, Atlantic City, Trenton, once you get off of the taxiways, you might cross a boundary. It's like a double yellow line. and that's the non-movement area. So anything past that line, you can taxi around, you don't have to talk to anyone. However, at like a Newark, sometimes they'll have a ramp controller, and the ramp controller is responsible for basically getting you to that last 100 feet into a gate. As you can imagine, at Newark, it's really congested with the huge jets all parked at gates side by side, and it'd be very easy to get into some kind of gridlock condition. So they have a ramp controller that will coordinate your movement into a gate. But that's something that you won't have to deal with as a GA pilot, even at a Bravo, if you did decide to fly into Philadelphia or Newark. Usually there, you're going to go into an FBO. You might want to contact the FBO on their specific frequency. They probably have a Unicom frequency that you can contact them on. But that's something that's a little bit beyond this video. This is really just to show you what it's like to go into and get out of Atlantic City. So as we fly back to Old Bridge here, I'm going to cut this short and maybe I'll show you the landing. Winds aren't too bad. Right now it's 040 at 18 knots at altitude. On the ground it's pretty calm, so it probably won't be a very eventful landing. So perfect YouTube content here to show you off some good landings, but only in good weather.